What's going on, everybody? Mike Singer from blueandgold.com with rivals.com, National Recruiting Director Mike Farrell, a fan favorite of Fighting Irish fans, might I add, Mike. But I think, every fan base out there thinks, well, Mike Farrell hates my school. But
Mhm.
I mean, so what school do you like then, Mike, if you hate everybody?
I don't like any anymore. I grew up a Boston College fan, and I think that's where Notre Dame fans feel the hatred comes from because I started in this industry covering Boston College. But I don't care. Like, once you get into this and you've been doing it for so long, you really couldn't care less who goes where and who wins what football game. It becomes a job and not a sport anymore. So maybe that's where it comes from. But, I mean, listen, why would Alabama fans hate me for Boston College so it's just endless. I think it means I'm doing my job well because if everybody liked me, then I'm just blowing sunshine up, and I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. Let's get into talking about Notre Dame's 2021 recruiting class. Have it pulled up on the screen here. 27 total signees for the Irish. Um, Finished the early signing period 9 and then dropped a spot with the February signing period. Michigan, actually, Notre Dame's biggest rival on the recruiting front, had a strong day and passed Notre Dame one spot in the ranking. So, just kind of overall thoughts when you look at this 2021 recruiting class, Mike.
Balanced class. They needed a lot of D backs on defense, and they wanted to go with length, and they were able to do that. I mean, every one of these defensive backs, except for one, is 6 foot or over. They wanted to get a little bit faster on defense. I don't know if they did that. Prince Colley's certainly an explosive, fast linebacker. Kahuna Kia, a little bit less so. And their defensive linemen aren't explosive, but they fit the scheme well. So I think the defensive class is very, very solid, and they hit the needs, especially a D-back. Offensively, the biggest problem they have is playmakers on the outside, and I think Lorenzo Styles will really, even though he's a slot guy, I think he's really going to help stretch the field for them. They got two tight ends. We know one or both are going to pan out and be very, very good. The running back 1-2 punch is awesome, but it all comes down, and the O line is great. I love the O line class. It's rated like I think fourth or fifth overall in the country. It's all going to come down to the quarterbacks. It's all going to come down to Tyler Buckner. Ron Paulus is sort of an afterthought, but it's going to come down to one of these two guys stepping up and being able to win games rather than manage them and be able to come back when they trail.
So when you look at the class, Mike, you mentioned a few players specifically, but guys that you really like when you pop on the tape and evaluating them, who are you really impressed with?
Styles I like a lot, because he's a very explosive, fast kid. He's an Ohio kid, so it's a big get for them. He's got a younger brother who could be even better than him. I mean, there's everything to like about him, and that's the kind of speed, that Will Fuller type of speed that they need on offense. Obviously, Blake Fisher has a chance to be a great one, but I also really like the other two linemen that stand out. Rocco Spindler, because he's just a brawler and a real good get from Michigan. Caleb Johnson is 6'7", 290, still looks skinny. He's raw. He's a developmental guy, and I don't. Every time I talk about Notre Dame, I end up comparing somebody to Mike McGlinchey, and I don't want to do that. But that type of guy where it might take him a couple of years to physically get ready, but he's going to be a real good one down the line. So, those stand out to me. Buckner is the interesting one because he didn't play this past season. He's been injured a lot of his high school career, so really doesn't have a lot of games under his belt at the high school level. But he can move, he can run, he can throw. His release got wonky this summer. That's going to be fixed. I mean, I'm sure it's already being fixed right now, and he's a guy who puts up big numbers when he's healthy.
Let's talk a little bit more about Buckner. So he was following his junior season, which he accounted for, I believe it was 81 total touchdowns. That was someone who was kind of on that fringe of 5-star status and finished right around what is it, 110, 111 in the country. But pop on his junior tape. He's not playing very strong competition in small ball San Diego, but it just seems like, yeah, like you said, Mike, the class kind of it goes as the quarterback does.
Yeah, and he's better at this stage than Ian Book was, and we really didn't expect Ian Book to develop into the multi-year starter at Notre Dame. He did. Ian Book has some limitations. I think Buckner has less. The competition is not great down there, so you can put up huge numbers. We've seen quarterbacks from the very south of California put up huge numbers and go off and have mild success here and there. Um, and then there's the Alex Smiths of the world, who come from San Diego, who go on to be the number one pick in the draft and a 12-year NFL veteran. So you just don't know with quarterbacks, especially with limited evaluation. We didn't get to see Tyler this spring. We saw him at the Elite 11, what I would call a limited Elite 11 in the summer, and we didn't get to see him this season. So, it's a lot of guesswork in the 2021 class when it comes to ranking kids, and a lot of it's based on old film. But, what you see here is his ability to make throws on the run, be able to make throws accurately down the field, and put the ball in a position where his receiver is the guy who's going to catch it. So you like that he doesn't make a lot of mistakes.
So now moving into some guys that you feel like you might look at in a few years and be like, we missed on that one. Logan Diggs, you've already said might be one. Prince Colley, Butkus Award winner, snuck into the Rivals 250 late in the process. That another one? Anyone else that comes to your mind?
Yeah, I mean, definitely Logan Diggs. There's a lot of similarities. I mean, even down to the size and stature and the ability to make plays in the passing game and make people miss in space. And Etienne was a guy who sort of developed a little bit late, and so did Diggs. And LSU was late on Etienne, and they offered him and wanted him, but they lost him to Clemson. LSU was late on Diggs. They came in, tried to get him back. To stay in state didn't work. So there's a lot of parallels there. So we could be looking at a guy that could be now. Travis Etienne sets the bar pretty high,
Right.
but we could be looking at a 3-star guy that definitely should have been a 4 or 5. Colley at a 5'8", he's an undersized guy. It depends on how big he gets because he's fast, he's explosive. He's 6'2", so he's got a frame. He's just skinny and raw right now, but athletically he's off the charts. I would look honestly, because of the way Notre Dame's been doing this, at Jason Anye from Rhode Island. They always take some really raw, long, smart, hardworking kid that hasn't put it all together in high school. They bring him to Notre Dame and they turn him into a great player. And Anye could be that guy. We've seen it many times. I mean, the last couple have been from North Carolina. He's from Rhode Island. It doesn't matter. But he's 6'5", he's 250, and he's just going to step up his game when he plays better competition. So he's another one that kind of stands out that, we ranked him where he should be right now, but his ceiling is high and he could develop quite a bit.
Let's go back to looking at the Rivals 2021 team recruiting rankings. Of course, Alabama, the best class in Rivals history according to the point scale formula. There's Notre Dame finishing at number 10 with its 27 signees. If you look at it, Mike, I mean, Notre Dame finishes lower in the recruiting rankings, but then it is making the college football playoff 2 of the past 3 years and outperforming some other teams that are ranked higher in the recruiting rankings. So the question there, and this is actually Notre Dame's first top 10 class since 2013. So it's actually been a while. So is Notre Dame recruiting at a level and then developing? I mean, how do you kind of see Notre Dame moving forward as a potential national championship contender? They've gotten to the college football playoff, but they haven't won any of the semifinal games yet.
It's unfair. I mean, and I talked to Brian Kelly about that on signing day, and he said it's a non-starter at Notre Dame. Academics are first and foremost. They can recruit half the kids in the Rivals 100, and you look at the teams in front of them: Alabama, Ohio State, LSU, Texas A&M, Oregon, Georgia, Clemson, USC, and Michigan. and Michigan has a high academic standard, but it's not close to Notre Dame. All of those schools can take kids Notre Dame can't. Most of those schools can take JUCO kids. Um, it's just not a fair playing field. So for them to make the playoff, obviously, is impressive. And then they get waxed, and everybody says they don't belong. Brian Kelly did say that the team he lost to in the national championship game, the Alabama team, and the one he lost to this last year, no one was beating. It doesn't matter who it was. And they did a good job. I think they held them, he said, to 8 or 9 possessions. But this is just not fair. And it never will be in national recruiting nowadays. So, I asked him about his quote about top 5 recruiting classes, and he said that was meant for Notre Dame. Like, we want an internal top 5 recruiting class, not against the rest of the country, because it's just not an even playing field. I think they have the same issues that they've had in the past, and they're going to have to find a special quarterback, because this is a game about offensive line and quarterback. And quarterback is the differentiator. If you don't have a good quarterback, you're not going anywhere. You can have a serviceable one, but you're not going to win at all. So the O-line is going to be no problem. The running game is going to be strong, but will they be able to find the right quarterback? And they haven't done that yet. So is this a national title, caliber class? No, because Alabama, Ohio State, and others are light years ahead when it comes to, depth of talent. And Notre Dame just doesn't have the ability to add that type of depth at the 4-star level. I mean, yeah, they can get 3 stars with good academics and coach them up. But, Alabama loses a 5-star, another 5-star just jumps right in. And that's just the way it is.
So we've talked a couple times now about your interview with Brian Kelly, and up on the screen is that quote, Notre Dame hoping to have a top 5 class. So you can find the interview here on the Rivals YouTube page. So, but closing, Mike, what did you think about Brian Kelly? You spoke to a lot of head coaches that day. Adam Gorney did as well in the Rivals national staff. What were your thoughts about talking with Brian Kelly?
I liked it. It was one of the conversations I was looking forward to the most. Now, I don't know Brian Kelly. We aren't friends. We don't, we grab beers. He's Irish. I'm Irish. That's about as close as you get. I mean, he's a football coach. He's 10 times smarter than I am when it comes to football. I'm just a guy, who does a job that he respects but doesn't love, and most coaches don't love what we do. But I was looking forward to it because I got to ask him the questions I really wanted to ask. I went through the class, and of course he wants to promote the class. So we went through the class. That was important. But then I got to ask him about, this perception that Notre Dame doesn't belong in a playoff because they get drilled every time. I got to ask him about the academics, and if it's a non-starter at Notre Dame to have a little bit more flexibility there. I got to ask him a lot of cool questions, and he was great. I thought he was a great interview. I really liked it. I have heard not so great things about Brian Kelly as far as personality-wise from people that I know. It was one of my favorite interviews. I talked to Saban, and I talked to Sarkisian, and I talked to, I don't know who else. I mean, there were like a billion of them. It's just, this one was fun for me, and I found Brian Kelly to be very accommodating.
Yeah, I thought that was, covered Notre Dame for a couple years now. I thought like that was one of the better interviews, especially when, the local media would talk to Brian Kelly on National Signing Day. It's just about kind of just general topics, and you guys dove into the recruiting class. So we'll leave the link to that video interview in the description box.
I wanted to say one more thing. The local media does a great job, but they're afraid of Brian Kelly because they got to deal with him every day. I deal with a guy once a year. So I have the flexibility to ask questions that they can't, because they got to come back the next week and get quotes from them. And so that's an advantage that I had with Nick Saban too. I mean, that interview was 10 minutes, and I got to ask him some questions he didn't want to answer and things like that. It's a tremendous advantage. So I liked it because Brian Kelly was open, and we got to talk about things that are talked about on message boards. And it's nothing against the local media, but I don't have to talk to Brian Kelly again until next year. So I have a huge advantage over the local media when it comes to interviews. And that's why I think it was better.
And we will look forward to that interview next year on National Signing Day. So that's going to wrap up this video talking with Rivals National Recruiting Director Mike Farrell. You can find him on Twitter at Rivals Mike. Make sure you hit the thumbs up on this video, subscribe to our channel, and go over to blueandgold.com for all of your Notre Dame recruiting coverage.